You are not going to be useful around the house, huh? Then why fucking stay if that is the kind of wife you are? I was left to sit there in stunned silence at what my mother-in-law had just said. His mother glared at me with this awful, seething look. We have Francisco, and we do not want you anymore. Really? Why are you always tired and never seem to get things done? Why is that? My sister-in-law, who never helps around the house, said to me in a bored voice, Francisco, this is too much. Don't you think your mother's and sister's words are going overboard? I'm doing my best too. When I sought help from my husband, he responded with a demeaning attitude. I agree with my mother and sister. I'm busy with work and I'm in trouble if you don't help with the chores. Besides, my relationship with the new part-time girl is progressing, and you're just baggage. Can you quickly pack and live somewhere else? As I was shocked by Francisco's words, I checked the reactions of the three. They all seemed to blame me. A rage I couldn't put into words welled up in my chest. I took a deep breath, calmed myself, and said, I understand, I need some time. My in-laws, who had relied on me so much until now, were starting to fall apart. My name is Michelle. I'm 32 years old. I am working and I spend my days doing my best in both my job and household chores. Nowadays, it's not uncommon for women to continue working even after getting married, but I truly love my job, and I'm still striving at the company I joined right after college. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, my husband approached with a pleading look. Michelle, can you take care of this? What I received from my husband's hand was a file crammed with receipts and bills. This again. You should manage your cafe's finances properly, I said with a smile, to which my husband Francisco responded with a slightly spoiled face. Sorry, but I'm really bad at that. I met Francisco in an unusual way. I was drawn to him while he was working part-time at a cafe I frequented. After a few chats, we naturally began dating and eventually talked about marriage. Now, Francisco owns that cafe. However, contrary to how he runs the cafe, he's not good at paperwork and always asks me to handle the accounting. As I sighed, my mother-in-law chimed in. Michelle, I suddenly feel like eating Chinese food tonight. Sure, but could you rinse the rice a bit? Well, why don't you come home early and do it? Plus, Mia and the kids are coming this weekend, so we have to think about their meals. All right, I got it. I nodded to my mother-in-law's request and hurriedly left the house. Before getting married, I was excited about my new life with Francisco, but he suggested, my mum's lonely by herself now, so why don't we all live together in our big house? So now I live with his mother. To put it lightly, she's not good at household chores. When we moved in, the house was a bit of a mess. After my father-in-law passed away, she started living on a pension, but she mostly spends it on eating out or taking out food. Francisco seems to think that housework is a woman's job, so it ends up being my full responsibility. Francisco's sister, Mia, occasionally brings her kids home. Every time she does, my to-do list grows, and I can't help but think, another chaotic weekend is approaching. Weekends are precious times to recover from the usual exhaustion. However, my sister-in-law's children would ask to play or complain about being hungry. I found myself preparing meals in the kitchen and also entertaining the children. Then my sister-in-law dropped a bombshell. Michelle, I'm getting divorced and will be moving back here with the kids next month. Surprised, I was so shocked I momentarily lost words. Really? Yes, do you have something to say? No, I was just thinking it must have been hard. When are you moving? I want to move as soon as possible. Well, surprised that my sister-in-law and her children would be moving in, I thought that maybe she would help, and household chores would be more manageable. We had a normal relationship, but I hoped that this would bring us closer and she would help with the chores. I spent every day with a positive attitude. However, reality had other plans. Perhaps because she grew up with my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law seemed to live a life devoid of housework. She spent most of her time lounging on the sofa, watching TV, and always had some snack with her. Watching her, I realized her neglect of housework might have contributed to her divorce. Now, with the added responsibility of preparing meals for her children and making lunches for kindergarten, my workload increased and my free time diminished. I had hoped she would help, but it was very disappointing that it turned out to be a swing and a miss. Then there was a time when my work at the company suddenly became hectic. Every day I would start work early and do overtime. When I returned home exhausted, the room would be overflowing with things, with no space to even walk. Every time I came home and saw the scene, waves of fatigue would wash over me. On top of that, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law would complain. "Is dinner ready yet?" Or, "Why are you home so late?" When I couldn't manage household chores, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law would say things like, "Michelle, there's a mountain of laundry waiting. Don't slack off just because you're busy," in a cold manner. "Mother-in-law, I'm really trying my best," I thought, but before my sister-in-law could say anything, I often chose to remain silent. "Michelle, are you standing up to your mother-in-law? That's a bit bold, but for the sake of the children, please try a little harder to make homemade meals," my sister-in-law said. "If you have so much free time at home, why don't you help out once in a while?" she continued. "What? Doing household chores? Ha, ha. Francisco owns a store, so Michelle doesn't need to work, right? If that's the case, maybe you should try a little harder at home." Behind their words, I felt the pressure that I should be doing more. That night, at the peak of my stress, I decided to speak my mind to Francisco. "I've been so busy lately, and neither my mother-in-law nor my sister-in-law are helping out with household chores, so it's really hard." "Michelle, you're not speaking ill of our family, are you?" Francisco's eyes sharpened a bit, and I braced myself. "That's not what I mean, but it's hard for me to do everything by myself. If you helped out once in a while, things would be a little easier for me. I'm busy managing the store. It's different from a regular job. Housework is the wife's responsibility, right?" Even so, a bit disappointed by his response, I sat and thought for a while. A good idea suddenly popped into my head. I had a brainstorming moment. Could this work? I silently pumped my fist. I immediately grabbed my smartphone, opened my favorite online shop, and started adding necessary items to the cart. After completing the purchase, I went to bed satisfied. A few days later, my new electronic household appliances, which would become my lifelines, were delivered to our home. The latest washing machine, a cleaning robot that cleans every corner of the room, and a rice cooker that cooks delicious rice without much effort. Each of them was a savior, making my daily life just a little bit easier and more enjoyable. As I was setting up the new washing machine, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law suddenly appeared with surprised expressions. "Wait, Michelle, you got such a fancy washing machine? But the old one was still good, wasn't it?" Smiling gently, I replied, "The old one took a bit too long, and I heard this new one shortens the laundry time." Their gaze then shifted to the cleaning robot and the new kitchen appliances. "See, I've also upgraded these," I said, showing them off a bit. "All these things, cleaning robots and convenient cooking appliances. Michelle, come over here for a moment," my mother-in-law said. Inside the room, seeing the slightly surprised expressions of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, I smirked to myself. Francisco sat next to me, and the four of us began our discussion. "Hey, why did you buy so many things?" My mother-in-law raised her voice. "Do you really need all these new appliances? Isn't it just because you want to make things a bit easier?" She continued, "Well, I thought it would be nice if things around the house could run a bit more smoothly," I replied, with a slightly troubled expression. But my mother-in-law chimed in, "Relying too much on machines? Aren't we interrupting the—" The sister-in-law waved her hand. "But, Michelle, the appliances we had can still be used. Francisco is working hard managing his store. Maybe you should be more frugal." Francisco nodded in agreement with his sister. In a quiet voice, I murmured, "Maybe you're right." There was a hint of anger in my mother-in-law's eyes. "Are you even considering our household?" I stumbled over my words. I really am, but I'm just a bit exhausted. My mother-in-law raised her voice. Enough! I can't believe you're our daughter-in-law. My sister-in-law, with a disgusted look, added, I'll watch over Francisco. We don't need someone like you here. When I looked at Francisco, he said coldly, I understand what Mum and Sis are saying. It's a bit difficult to have a wife who doesn't do housework. Looking at Francisco's face, my heart felt heavy. He continued with a cold smile. I have my own store, so I decide how to use my money. But being with someone who spends on anything and everything might be difficult. Why has it come to this? Despite being shaken by his words, I looked into Francisco's eyes and counted. Also, I've noticed things have been going well with that new part-time girl. She's more attractive than you are now. Maybe it's time for you to pack up and find a new place to live. A fire of anger surged within me. Although I didn't voice it, it was clear in my eyes. But taking a step back and calming myself, I replied after taking a deep breath. All right, I'll look for a new home. That's better. Finally, you understand? I'll feel much better without you around. Hearing those words, I felt a surge of indescribable emotion. I took out something I had already prepared from a corner of the room. Well, let's send it with this. In my hand was a divorce paper already filled out. I had it on hand, anticipating that something might happen someday. Oh, you had this prepared beforehand, Francisco said. Well, it doesn't matter. I'll sign it. Enjoy your new life. Smugly, Francisco signed the papers. That night, I moved to a nearby weekly rental apartment with just the bare essentials and the divorce paper. No one tried to stop me when I left. Did they ever really care about me? After submitting the divorce paper at the city office, I found a stylish apartment to start fresh. During this time, an unexpected opportunity came my way, a promotion I had been putting off because of my family situation. I seized this chance and began working as a section manager. Every day, as I dedicated myself entirely to my job, I felt a renewed sense of accomplishment. In the midst of these busy days, my phone rang. The caller ID showed it was my former mother-in-law. I thought, we have nothing to do with each other anymore, right? And without checking her message, I swiped to dismiss the call. My new life had begun, and I wouldn't look back at the past. A year flew by. One weekend, as I was relaxing in my room listening to my favourite music, my phone rang again. To my surprise, it was my former mother-in-law. Wondering what she wanted after all this time, I picked up. Hello, is something wrong? I asked. Michelle, I finally got through. I didn't think you would answer after so many calls. Well, it's been a while. What's going on? She hesitated a moment and then asked, How's your new life? Despite her probing tone, I replied cheerfully, It's great. I love my new apartment and work is going smoothly. I even got promoted and am living freely. That's good. Michelle, can you come back home? I was taken aback and blurted out, Why? We're struggling financially. I thought to myself, I knew it, and responded, Carly, Francisco's cafe only makes about $1,000 a month, right? If no one else in the family works, things could be tough. You knew about that. Yes, Francisco's cafe wasn't doing well. I was fully aware of its financial situation since I handled all the accounting. But he pretended to be the successful owner without understanding the real state of his business. It was almost laughable how oblivious he was. I handled all the finances and procurement, so of course I knew. She seemed shocked. You knew and didn't tell us. And we didn't know you were doing so well in such a big company, or that you were contributing so much to the household expenses. Yes, I contributed more than $3,000 every month. Thanks to that, you all managed. The truth was, to bridge the gap in Francisco's business losses, I used my salary. He seemed completely unaware of the situation, and after I left, it seemed reality hit hard. Michelle, can you please come back? Curious, I asked. So how's Francisco's cafe doing now? She sighed. We might have to close soon. The part-time workers keep quitting, I said with a bit of an inward smirk. With that slightly sloppy management style, it's hard to keep it going for long, isn't it? His little bit of pride doesn't help, not doing proper work. I mean, how many women out there do you think would be willing to support a guy like that? My former mother-in-law was momentarily at a loss for words given my somewhat sarcastic comment. Suddenly she said, "Wait, I'm a bit busy now. Since you left, the house is a mess. It's chaotic with things everywhere." "Wait, what do you mean?" I asked. She described the disarray of their home, with belongings scattered everywhere, looking like a storeroom. Without anyone to cook, they were eating out, which was costing a lot. The washing machine broke down, and there was no room in the budget to buy a new one. "Actually, the appliances that you took back, I was really relying on them," my former mother-in-law said. "Huh? Why is that? Those were for my convenience. Besides, I bought them myself, so it's okay for me to take them back, right?" "Yeah, I guess so. But I never realized housework was this challenging," my former mother-in-law said with a firm tone. "With 3 adults in the house, how can it be that hard? What are Francisco and your daughter doing?" A hint of fatigue could be heard in her voice. "As for Francisco, his staff members have been quitting, and sales have plummeted. As soon as he found out, he became really downcast and has just been lazing around at home." "What? But Francisco used to spend his money from the store without any restraint, right? On top of that, Mia doesn't help at all. She doesn't do anything around the house and even gets her allowance from me. To be honest, living on just my pension for the 3 of us is really hard." "Mia once told me that I was unnecessary because she was there," I responded with a hint of sarcasm. My former mother-in-law desperately said, "Michelle, we're really in trouble. Living on just my pension for the 3 of us is quite tough. I have no intention of returning to that house. It must be hard living with all the baggage." She seemed to be at a loss for words. Seeing her like this made me feel a bit sorry for her. But as I was about to hang up, my former mother-in-law seemed eager to say something. "Michelle, I'm really sorry. Can you reconsider us?" Her voice sounded a bit exhausted. "I wonder if we can ever spend days together with smiles again," she said. "Huh? Was it that hard without me?" I replied with a mix of surprise and calmness. After a short pause, my former mother-in-law took a deep breath. "Yes, there's actually an issue with the property tax. We might have to let go of the house." "I see, but I really don't want to get involved anymore. Decide what you're going to do with your family." I hung up without waiting for her next words. After that, I set it up so I wouldn't receive any more calls from her. In my room, holding my favorite mug filled with aromatic coffee, I enjoyed my time alone, looking at the outside scenery. A smile spontaneously appeared on my face. A few months later, when I passed by the cafe where Francisco used to work, I noticed the place was now quiet and empty. Recalling its past liveliness, I felt a bit nostalgic. It seems they really closed the shop. While walking around the old town, I became curious about my former in-laws' house and saw a sold sign. Coincidentally, I bumped into an old neighbor in town. According to her, those 3 had quickly sold their house and moved to a small apartment nearby. In their new home, there were always loud arguments and even the smell of garbage. It seems the neighbors are quite bothered, and it has become a bit of local gossip. It must be tough for them, I thought, but with a bit of effort, life can change. I wonder why they don't try. As I gazed at the old house, these thoughts wandered in my mind. A lot has happened to me since then, but I'm living each day to the fullest. In fact, a handsome guy from my workplace confessed, saying, "I really admire your hard-working nature." Now we're enjoying our dates, and I'm really looking forward to what the future holds. If I get married again, I really want to be happy. I'm feeling very excited about it now.